All right, guys, so welcome back. This is 716. Don't worry, it's on me.
You're like, whoa.
So we're actually talking about a topic today that was supposed to show up, what is it, 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah. We recorded it and everything, and we have special guests with us. But we'll get to that in a second. But we recorded these two testimonies, and for some reason, although we checked to make sure that the audio was recording, it didn't record. Nothing.
Yeah.
It was just visual. That's all we had. So with us today, we have. I'm gonna let you guys say your own names.
Who's going first? I'll go first. Carlo
and Joselito.
All right. So, and so that way we can get the ball rolling, get the ball going here. Give us a little rundown of who Carlo is, and then same for you.
My name is Carlo. I'm a local rapper from New Jersey, born and raised, and yeah.
All right. Cool.
My name's Joselito.
I love the
little
Lido.
Yeah, I got that gringo accent, I'm from New Jersey, and I am a Gen Z leader.
Okay.
Yes.
And yeah.
I like how you pointed that out.
Gen Z leader.
I had to make that like.
He's like, I'm not a
Put that
millennial
statement out there.
leader.
Of course.
and so I know that a lot of the stuff that we're probably gonna ask you guys is gonna be like repetitive, but we're all gonna we're gonna act like we never said anything before.
Wait, what is he talking about?
Yeah, what are you saying?
Yeah, exactly. And we're just gonna go with this as if we're hearing
right.
everything for the first time.
Right.
Yeah. So I gotta ask, because I asked this before, right? Are you okay with being called Gen Z? Are you guys okay with being called Gen Z? Because I know for some millennials that comes off as a way of mocking us or making fun of our generation, specifically with the Gen X and the Boomer generation.
Well, also, like, that was a thing, right? Where it's like, okay, Boomer.
Yeah,
like,
right. But they would be like, oh, like millennials, like that. But it was really just a way of making fun of our generation. Whereas now you guys are just like taking the whole title. Do you or does anybody find themselves getting offended by the whole idea of being called Gen Z?
Personally, I don't take offense to it. Gen Z, being called like just the titles are nothing, because there always gonna be a title.
That's true.
For
That is
the
true.
future generations and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I don't take offense to it.
All right. Cool.
Yeah. Same thing. I don't think anybody.
I mean, he just said I'm Gen Z leader.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
he's
Gen
just
Z
going
is
with
like
it.
a proud title. I think Gen Z is something that we as younger people, as the youth.
Excuse you, we are
Sorry.
young too.
Sorry,
okay?
the younger than young people.
The younger.
Younger than young. Okay.
That's a-
The
okay, good
babies.
save,
good
Got
save.
it. Got it.
I think that's a title that we can be proud of, because there's a lot of change going on. Yes, there's a lot of bad, but I think there's a lot of good that we can embrace as young people that have this motivation, especially when it comes to Gen Z and Christianity and stuff like that.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say, I think that the Gen Z generation for God is definitely more outspoken than a lot of generations that I've seen.
You know what the sad thing is about that? Although it is more outspoken, and at least like the Gen Z that are worshiping God, that are in it, ellos son están metidos, right?
Like
They're
bien
all the way, right?
Right.
But unfortunately, your generation is such in decline when it comes to being Christians.
Gotcha.
There's so the number dropped drastically. Apparently, I don't know the number specifically, but it was said before. I wish I had the stat right, but it was said before that it was dropped.
That
drastically.
I'm not sure the number of what it dropped to, but I know that being that was one thing that I had to search up and find out, was that actually Gen Z is only 4% Christian and hold that worldview of the Bible. And
So out of your entire generation, it's only 4%.
that hold that
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that is crazy.
crazy.
And
Yo, so you guys got to fight.
Yeah,
You
we
guys have a big
battle.
fight ahead of you.
One thing I could say though, the youth nowadays, they have so much energy and they have so much
Yes.
passion for Christ, and I love it. When I got back to the church, got back inside the church, that's the first thing I've noticed. The energy, the overwhelming love for God, and it's just inspiring.
Yeah, and that's kind of
that's
what
what
you
I'm
meant,
saying.
right?
Yeah, that
they're just
I
so
just
out
see
there.
the true the unashamed part of it. I'm just remembering that that whole generation part of saying unashamed with Joel and stuff.
With Joel, the whole unashamed thing. Did he ever drop that album?
Wow, you know what? He's all like, bro, come on.
No, go ahead.
No, but like seriously, like I see that the Gen Z that are serving Christ are truly unashamed, where I think no matter what, every generation will go through that period of like, you know, the peer pressure and feeling like, you know, I guess just the embarrassment of like not fitting in and stuff like that. I think a lot of people, if not most, do go through that because of our need to want to fit in. But I have noticed that, like, just in that same way, when the role is reversed, it's like, man, like the voice is loud, you know, and it's all like, well, this is what we are. We love God. Yeah. Where I feel like as our generation and even slightly before us, it was a little different. There was a lot of us, but it was a little bit quieter, you know?
Yeah. It feels like, honestly, the whole idea of, the unashamed, right? But the Jesus freak thing is coming back, right?
Yes.
Because back then, back when Jesus freak was first coming out as a term, there were so little Christians. Mm-hmm. I mean, you guys are talking 4% of your generation, right? Yeah. So back then, it was so little Christians, and it was really made fun of to be a Christian. It was so much so that secular people would say, "Oh, those guys are Jesus freaks," but then us Christians, we took it and we're like, yeah, we're Jesus freaks, represent.
That's where,
you know, and that became a whole thing.
That was what was it? DC Talk.
DC Talk, yeah.
Yeah, because
but it wasn't only. It was
no, but they made a song,
yeah,
and they really like took that label. This was like Pastor Renato's generation, Junior, where like there was that one song. Damn, how does it go? What would people think if they knew that I'm a Jesus freak? Yeah. So they were like the rock band.
You never heard of them?
No.
That's so familiar.
No, they're.
You've heard of it?
You definitely had to, like, because they're a very known like rock band. They're like Toby Mac time, like stuff.
But rock isn't really a thing right now.
Well, Toby Mac came out of them, so yeah.
But rock right now
isn't really a thing, right?
Yeah, not really.
No.
Christian either.
So we grew up on rock.
What is it for you guys right now?
The thing is, right now it's about it's a lot of rap, rap music,
rap or like Christian trap.
Yeah, it's like Christian trap music.
It's more trap music, right?
And it's like a lot of the younger Christians who are interested in making music, they make that type of music. Oh. And it's like I think it's really cool because it's one way for the youth to like, you know, connect with the outside world in a way for them to be able to understand what's being said, like be interested in wanting to hear what's being said in the music.
I mean, it's the concept of throwing the fish.
I was just gonna say that
on the other side of the boat. You know,
right.
It's the way of catching or be fisher of men, right?
Right. Yeah. Fisher.
And I mean that's basically what it's been through every generation. Rock was back then because that was the biggest thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so when it was Christian rock, people were like, this devil music, like, what do you mean?
But you
and
have
then
to
in
adapt.
our generation, like more, because I think rock started fading out.
We had reggaeton.
And then there was Christian reggaeton.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when we went through the young adults retreat,
we were doing a lot of
throwbacks, and I'm like, wow, I remember like this whole reggaeton stage, and I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And now it's like, it was reggaeton, it was rap too, and it was rock. And now I think
but
it's
rock
more,
not so much. I mean, there was
rock
like Firefly, Switchfoot, but it was already dying.
Right.
Oh, I've heard of Switchfoot.
You heard of Switchfoot.
Yeah. Okay, come on, bro.
Okay. Yeah. Like that, yo, you making me feel real old,
I know,
bro.
Don't worry.
So talking about your generation, I gotta ask, because I don't think I asked this the last time, or at least I don't remember if I did. But how is it in school? I mean, you're out of high school already, right? Yeah. But I'm sure you remember. Mm-hmm. When we were in high school, almost nobody was Christian. Yeah. How is it for you guys? Do you guys know of any other Christian person in school, or did you know of any other Christian person in school?
When I was going to school, when I first started high school, there wasn't really any other Christians. So one thing about me personally, what I went through, I was really like made fun of in a way for being Christian. And
so people knew you were Christian?
Yeah. At first, when I first begun high school. And in a way, them making fun of me kind of had pushed me away from Christ, and I let that affect me.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's like one of the reasons why I had departed from God when I was that age.
Yeah. It's
so
tough.
it was tough. Like you everyone surrounding you basically there was no Christian in sight.
No, not really. It was just a lot of negative influences, you know. and it's not per se the people, but it's just the environment, you know, like everything's so negative, everything's so like how the younger generation could pursue the world is very negative, very toxic, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it was like that for you too? Because you're a senior now, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
snap.
like-
So, like, how was it like freshman year?
And
Do you
senior
feel
year is tough, man.
senior year
Yeah.
is tough because you got all the, like, you know, temptation of the world and,
That's
like,
not for
the
nothing.
whole-
That's a sexual year.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, all of the years are, right? But I feel like that's the one year where that pressure really comes
Because
on.
prom is right around the corner.
Right.
You got,
Like,
yeah, it's
Right.
everything. It's everything.
But as
Yeah.
far as like your freshman year when you got there, like would you say that you knew other people and were you vocal about you know, God and Jesus and
My freshman year was actually the year that COVID hit. So this
Oh,
was the time that
shoot.
Oh,
we
wow.
were on Zoom, but at the same time we would switch back and forth between like online and like going in person, stuff like that. But since I was on Zoom, I took that as an opportunity to be like, all right, this is like a place where I can take my stand, whatever. So technically my first real year was sophomore year. And going to school sophomore year, having had that image and that title and like always posting about these Christian things and all these events and always being
Yeah.
at church, that was my title as soon as I got there. So there was a lot of like, I wouldn't call it persecution, but there was a lot of recognition that came with that. And a lot of it was negative, like, oh, he's this and he's that and he's a Jesus this and he's a Jesus that. And the thing about my school is that being in a health school for this generation, the things that are very promoted are things like abortion and LGBTQ healthcare and stuff like that. So
Right.
people make it their identities to kind of like become this big collection of, you know, worldly ideas and morals.
Right.
And so as a Christian, I'm standing here, you know, just normal. And then over here, you have like all these people coming at me like, oh, you're Christian, so this and that, and you're Christian, you're this and that. And
it always
And
comes
so
to
they're-
that point where they're like, so what do you think about this?
Yes,
and then you're
yeah, that's
like,
what I was just gonna
you're
ask.
like, I'm also still growing as a
Yeah.
Christian. So
Yeah,
you're like,
exactly.
that's a lot of pressure. Wow.
There was actually a whole bunch of times, and like there's a lot of people that know that there are people that would take my stories, repost them, and say, oh, he's blank, he's blank, he's blank. And one of them specifically was homophobic. I would always defend, you know, the Christian standpoint of how we believe in the love of loving a person, but not the sin. And obviously, I was very careful with how I said that because I didn't want to make it seem insensitive. I didn't want to make it seem like we're pushing something that's not true. So just an emphasis on love was something that I always made sure to, you know, prioritize in my responses to, you know, the Instagram stickers where you like put the poll and they write their questions. I would do those a lot because I thought those were very beneficial.
I've even remembered like seeing a couple of times and I'm like, wow, this guy's going in. I'm like,
Yeah,
good for you,
I would
dude.
lock
Good
in. I would
for
lock in
you.
when I write those. And
Yeah.
I remember one time someone from my school took my post, started writing like stuff about me and,
really?
and posting stuff. It was crazy, but I
Like they
think
did a whole account about you, or they
not
just
a whole
posted?
account, but on their account. So it
Oh,
was
I
like
see, I see.
blatant, like
Yeah.
blatant, just like
Like,
throwing my
don't
name out
follow
there.
this
Yeah.
guy. If you're following this guy,
Yeah.
you're
There was
you're
definitely,
supporting whatever.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot
Yeah.
of like slander from that, which came from like a misunderstanding of what the purpose of me writing these things were, which was obviously not to come at anybody. Just it happened to be my school was a majority, you know, supporting this, you know, these things. But like I think now senior year, it's definitely kind of cooled off a bit.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen anybody Christian in my sophomore year, except for my best friend who he was working on it. But, you know, as we got closer as friends, he got closer to Christ and, you know, his relationship flustered with God. And that was beautiful to see. But other than him, I don't think there was really anybody else. And now senior year, now I'm finally starting to see, you know, people come to Christ. And I think that's beautiful that there's just so many people that like have that heart and that potential and are like, there's one specifically who I've known him since my years, you know, in like elementary school, but I never had a relationship, like a friendship with him. And one day I see him posting that he's going to this retreat and he's going to this church and he's building this relationship with God. And
Isn't that such a joy?
I was like,
it's not like
finally,
there's
finally.
no way. Like there's definitely been and there's actually someone that recently started coming to our church, and I know they said like hi to you, and you were like,
yeah.
He was like, oh, I didn't know this person's brother came, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah,
this
yeah,
person's
yeah.
brother? And I was telling him because I had at one point in my life where I basically had a falling out with like the church and God and everything. And I remember one time even going to a party and he was there, but it was never anything like no kind of interest like that. But it was just like, hey, let's take a picture. And he was like all drunk and stuff. And I remember tagging, and then like whatever, obviously my life changed, and you know, I obviously continued to pursue God, but I never really knew this guy like that. And then seeing him in the service kind of just flashed me back to that picture, and I'm like, what a crazy difference and a dynamic. But honestly, it brings me joy because I'm like, wow, this is someone that I would have never expected like for this to happen. And God just like works in like so many awesome ways.
It
but
was amazing to see that.
But I will say, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I will say I feel like in this time, being so outspoken in your faith, I think is even harder now than it was in our time, because now we have so many just ideas and so many things to talk about. So for us, like when we were in high school, I you know, people knew me as Christian. I wasn't necessarily one that like was always like preaching, and social media, Instagram didn't even come out until I basically graduated high school. So it wasn't really a thing. It was more Facebook, but I just feel like we didn't we didn't have to like constantly defend. For us, it was more of the pressure of like, oh, you go to church, oh, you're whack for that. Like it was more of that. Gotcha. Now it's more like, oh, well, if you're this, you're homophobic, or you're this. So it's a lot rougher for you guys, I will say. So like, you know, kudos to you, and I pray that God continues to use you, because I already see like just little glimpse of things, and I'm here like, wow, that's crazy, because he's so young and he still has, you guys are both so young, and I'm here like, you have so much ahead of you guys, and I'm only like, I think like 10, 11 years older than you, but still, I'm here like, that's not a lot, but also I'm here like. It's
only a whole nother generation or a whole decade.
But there's so much that happens from the moment that you graduate high school until your 30s, like where it is now, where I feel like it just happened in a blink of an eye, but I'm also like, wow, there's so much that happened in between, but it just went by so fast. So I can only imagine, like, you know?
Yeah, look at her saying back in my day.
Back in my day.
Old heads.
You shush.
No, yeah, but going back, you know, like I mean, we had people that were like that. I had a specific person. I'm not gonna say his name, you know, because I shouldn't have to. But there was a specific person in my school where he blatantly said, "I don't like you," and I don't know why.
Wow.
It turns out he was like very satanic. I don't know. He was very into things that weren't that. He was very into like
emo,
he
but like extra.
It's funny because
like,
he considered himself atheist, but he still believed in like satanic worship and satanic music and satanic this and that, and it was.
But
always,
it almost seemed like a show. It almost seemed like a show. Like, I want people to be scared of me, and like
it was
whatever.
like a fear tactic. I mean, the guy. He had a complex.
Yes, yes.
And
That's a very
so
nice way.
he would come up to me a couple times, and he'd like, "Oh, well, your Bible says this. What do you have to say about this?" And he would try to attack me that way. You know, so there were people in our generation that were like that. But yeah, like she said, you know, you guys have it to a point where it's like you get canceled. It's like homophobic.
Because now it's in the internet now. That's why.
Yeah.
But going back to that moment, like, do you remember what he said to you one time? Where so he comes up to him because me.
Are you talking about that time where that encounter in the hallway?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say.
No, go ahead.
So basically, I knew this guy. So I'm like the person that like talks to everyone. And I was like, hey, what's up? So whatever. So he was in my period, and Xavier, like, we're high school sweethearts. So he would come and pick me up from my class and walk me to my next class. So one time, I think we were waiting for like gym to start or something like that. So he would wait for me to go in, and then the kid was there, and I guess for some reason he came up and he told Xavier, like, he's like, you know, I don't like you. I don't know why, but something's different about you. Yeah. And I don't like that. And I was like, I know what that is. I'm like, it's the love of God, bro. Like, and you're just, you know, so it's just funny.
No, I mean, when you're Christian, when you're walking the way God wants you to walk, there is a difference.
There is a difference.
People will ask me, even at work, like parents will ask me. I remember one time this parent asked me, he was like, hey, you know, like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I'm driving this bus. I mean, I work as a bus driver. And he's like, no, but do you do something else? Because there's just something different. Like there's something about you. Like, do you like have another business or do you do something else? I'm like, no, I'm a student and I'm a bus driver, you know, but I feel like that what they're seeing, what they're not understanding is that the light that shines in us, they haven't explored that yet.
Yeah, we just stand out.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't understand like why or what's so different. Like there's just something different about you.
Yeah.
Which is honestly a compliment.
And also when you guys, I mean, when you were experiencing, you know, high school, I mean, you still are, right? Yeah. I was in college and I was actually in a philosophy class where I made sure that people knew me as a Christian, right? And it's a philosophy class, so it's like,
and it was on Zoom too.
Yeah, it was on Zoom too. So it's like, oh, you know, like what's the meaning of life and stuff like that. But they would attack Christianity a lot, especially the professor. Yeah. He would talk about how the Bible is very contradicting, and you shouldn't reference the Bible in any way. Like you shouldn't live your life according to the Bible because, I mean, look at the passage where it talks about striking your children with a rod. And I told him, I explained it to him what that meant. And back in the day, you know, based on culture, that's the way you discipline your children. But nowadays it's just talking about disciplining your children.
Yeah.
You know, and you discipline them the way you need to.
Yeah.
You don't have to strike them with a rod. I mean, we know that we don't have to do that. But discipline them. And that was the concept of that verse. But he completely just like ignored me. He swiped the slide and he made it sure that it was only on him only because you could do that on Zoom.
It's funny because like he really did not like you.
No, he didn't like me at all.
And I just remember one time, like, because he would have the early classes, and I remember one time I'm sleeping and I like wake up like, what's going on? And he's just like preaching the word, but you could tell he's all, and someone else like starts asking you like, okay, yeah, well, what about this and that?
Well,
he's like,
okay, so I'll get to that. So basically what happened that day was we were talking about LGBTQ. We were talking about gays and stuff like that. And there was a topic where the girl was like, oh, but Christianity is there, you know, Christians are homophobic. And I was like, whoa, I'm Christian and I'm not homophobic. So speak for some people, but don't speak for me.
Right.
You know, because I understand that there's a lot of people that preach hate, but really that's not what it is, what it's about. Christianity has nothing to do with hate. The problem is that you don't like the word that's in our Bible.
Yeah.
You know, so if you want to know what the Bible says, I'll tell you. But if you want to know what's in my heart, I have to love you.
Yeah.
You know, and they didn't like that response. Some girl was like, oh, well, how many times do you have to say it before we finally get the message or whatever? I was like, so stop asking. I mean, if you're going to continue to ask, it's because you want to know or because there's something in your heart that wants to know whether or not you're right or wrong. So it's like, that's up on you.
Yeah.
You know, that's on you.
Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm waking up with bad hair and I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like that philosophy class is fire today. And then I just lock out again. Like,
yeah, but that's the world that we're living in. So moving on, you know, in the category of LGBTQ, because we do know somewhat of your testimony. Do you want to speak on that? Do you want to go a little further into or start talking about what your testimony is?
Of course. So one thing that I want to start with is that when it came to testifying of my backstory or background when it comes to my walk with God is that I was never always fully open with my testimony, and that was something that I understood hindered my walk with God because I would tell all the good parts of my testimony, but then when it came to certain things, there was a fear that would hold me back from expressing this part that also God saved me from, and that specific part was homosexual attraction. In this generation, speaking of Gen Z either has a very strong love for people that support it or a very strong hate for people that don't support it. Yeah. And obviously, growing up in a Christian household, with the homosexual attraction, that was something that I feared because I didn't want to receive the hate and I didn't want to receive the criticism from it. So it's something I kept hidden within. And in my testimony, I've always grown up with, you know, the church. I always grew up in church, doing church things, and in my walk with God specifically, it started, you know, really rocky. It started with all these different things that, in all these different situations that I was put in that really, you know, as a Christian, were things that I should have looked to and been like, God, I need your help on this. But because I wasn't secure in my faith, because I wasn't secure in my walk with God, those are things that I kind of ignored and pushed aside. So like to start, like in the beginning, like I said, grew up in church, had these opportunities to worship. And one thing specifically in my testimony is prophecy. It's very significant that, at least to me in my walk with God, that prophecy was something that carried throughout my entire walk, even though I wasn't always focused on God. There's a prophecy that I would go out into nations and do mission work and go to nations that I haven't been to. And that was one time that I was super young, didn't understand, and was like...
You were like, I don't want to go to all these nations. What do you mean?
I completely forgot when that was, but it was around when I was super young.
Right.
And so, you know, through this time when I'm getting older, you know, I'm cultivating my relationships outside of church and with school. And I get into all these different relationships, all these different friendships, and they're just not good. And one person that always would bring these things up to me that, like, you know, be careful who you're hanging out with, be careful what you're doing, was my grandma. She is also a big part of my testimony.
Yeah.
And she was a very spiritual, devoted person who loved to serve. She was an amazing servant of God, and she always, you know, kept our family together with Christ at the center. That was basically like her role in my life and in my family's life.
Wow.
And so, you know, she always prayed, like, I want to see you on the altar. I want to see you worship. I want to see you do all these things. And so one day I get the opportunity to start singing for our main church on Wednesday services or Sunday services for the kids' church. And I'm like, all right, cool. That's cool. Whatever.
Were you nervous, like for starting off?
Yeah, of course. I was very nervous. I didn't really want to do it. And that was because I didn't understand the significance of worship. So I was like, all right, I'm just up here singing. I know I don't have a good voice. I'm like, what, 10, 8, 9, around there. And I'm like, all right, but I'll do it. So actually around the same time as well, I also received a second time the same prophecy from a completely different person. And he tells me the same thing, that you're going to go out into nations and do discipleship. You're going to do, you know, the work for the Lord in different nations that you haven't been to. And so now it clicks in my head. I'm kind of like, all right.
You're like, I heard this before.
That sounds familiar. But again, not secure in my walk with God, brush it off and completely ignore it. And because of that, I feel like when I ignored the word of God, there were things that came as consequences or things that came as learning lessons in my life and in my walk. The friends I hung out with were not good at all. They always, you know, spoke foul language. They always encouraged my speech. They always encouraged my actions. And yes, they were good friends in certain places, but in other, you know, spiritual aspects, they were, you know, not good.
Real quick, would you say that it was difficult to have Christian friends, or were you friends with them just because it was easier, because that's what's around?
I would say that having Christian friends, like in the church, was a little bit harder because I saw the conflict that having non-Christian friends would create. Like if I had a group of non-believing friends and a group of church friends, those would kind of they would clash and collide with each other. So I was like, all right, I'll just keep them separate. And just, you know, keep them in their respective places. So outside church is outside church, and in church is in church.
Yeah, it was the same. Yeah, same for me growing up. Like,
and that was something that came and brought negative consequences.
Yeah.
And one of those was, you know, like partying. Every time I went to a party, whether it was like a birthday party, school, it was never good. There was always influence, and those things were, as a Christian household, were things that, you know, I knew were wrong, but continued to pursue anyways, regardless of how I felt about it. And so, you know, pursuing these things, these mindsets, they created inside me kind of like a mentality that, you know, these bad things I can just push aside if it's enjoyable or if it's pleasurable to me. And obviously that was the completely wrong mindset.
Yeah.
And as I grew older and kind of started realizing that church was speaking on these specific topics, like, oh, don't go to parties. When I would go to youth group, they would talk and they would be like, don't go to parties because parties are bad. And they would talk about that whole thing. They would give sermons about that. Or they would be
You're
like, and I'm sitting in the back. I was always the shy one. I would always sit in the corner by the window, and I would be like, okay, that's real. That's pretty like close to home. Like, how did you know?
Yeah, like
so I'm hearing these things, but I'm also experiencing these things, and at the same time they're kind of colliding, and I feel this like sense of conviction, and now I understand that it's conviction. But I was like, all right, maybe I should start taking my walk with God seriously. And so during this time, those friends that I hang out with, you know, that vape, that smoke, that that party and do all these different things, I was like, all right, maybe it's time that I cut them off. And so I'm like, all right, guys, bye-bye. Hasta mañana. See you later.
And,
you know,
deuces. Like,
that honestly was pretty hard because as
I was just going to ask. Yeah.
As a young, younger than young person growing up.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
It's like
very accommodating for her.
Yes,
it's very like, all right, now that I just, lost all my friends, now what? Like where do I put myself?
Also, you didn't know, wait, so
you cut everyone off.
Yeah, you didn't have friends in church? Or
not really, because I wouldn't associate myself with church in that way at that time, because I was like, church is not really like,
church
I go on Sundays and that's about it.
You go out of obligation.
Obligation. My parents would always go, and now praise God, I'm glad they allowed me to go and continue to push me to go, but that's for like later. But at the time I was like, all right, Sunday, another 2 hours, maybe even 4 if we go for Sunday class, but whatever.
Every kid's life.
Dude, I grew up saying, like, because I was born and raised in church, and I remember saying like, yo, when I'm 18, I'm out. Like, bye, I'm out. Like, I don't tell me, but like, here I am, 30 years old, not out, very much loving God. So it just, but I'm sorry, continue.
So, now I'm at this point where I have no friends and still going to church, but not really like focused on it. And I'm just kind of like lost, a little confused. And so I'm like, all right, let me push forward and try and like fill myself up with, a friendship, or something that I was longing for was to not be alone. That's something that in my testimony, I see that I look back on, and I realize that a lot of things that I've done and a lot of the things that I've been through were out of a response to not wanting to be alone and not being able to find, a answer to loneliness in Christ. And I would find it in other places. And so in this specific instance, I found myself making this friend, getting real close. And this was very like, it was normal. It felt fine. There wasn't anything wrong with it until later on, after I had given him my entire life story, telling him all the things I've been through.
This friend, not a Christian.
Not a Christian.
Okay. You got rid of your non-Christian friends. And you found yourself another friend.
That was not Christian.
Okay.
So here I am, spilling my life to him. And,
so it's like your best friend, you would say.
At this point, he's like my best friend. And eventually we get really close and, we hang out, we do all these things. But one day he comes out to me and tells me that he has feelings for me. And as a Christian, I'm like, all right, I know this is
red flag, right
not
away.
really like where I stand. But
how did that make you feel? Like, just even in the sense of like friendship? Because I feel like
Are you looking for the reaction at that moment?
Yeah, because I feel like if someone were to tell me that, I'd be kind of shocked.
Yeah, in that
I'd
moment,
be like,
I was very shocked.
What?
Yeah, I was very shocked.
Yeah.
I was like, that's interesting. I've never had, a friend tell me that before.
Yeah.
And so obviously I don't want to just ignore him completely because we've been very close and we've built this friendship as boys and as guys, and we want to keep that, but this was kind of like, I'm Christian, I don't roll this way, so I don't want to make you think something that's not there. So I told him, I'm Christian, these are my standards, these are my morals, and I can't really go against them, and I don't want to go against them. So we can still be friends as long as you keep the respect and the boundaries. And so that's where I was
very
like,
Christian of you. Good job.
I was like,
it's very strong of you. How old were you at this point?
I think I was around 12, maybe.
Wow, that's what?
13.
That's a really good spiritual maturity you had right there, to be able to, like, obviously, because one thing is to be Christian and say, whoa, red flag, I can't, like, now we can't be friends. But you were mature enough to say, hey, this is how I am as a Christian. You need to respect that. I'm not gonna just ignore you now, but please, like, have some boundaries.
Of course.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that I emphasized with him in that moment when he expressed that to me, and I was like, we can still be friends and all this. So moving forward in our friendship, obviously now it's a little bit awkward because it's like, all right, so I don't want to.
There is something.
You're like, do I just ignore this?
It's like you saying you like a girl and
she rejects you, and you're like, you guys are just like, so, what's up? But it was like that, and we hadn't like been together since then. Like, it was just like kind of like distant. But then eventually he comes and he tells me, can you send me certain pictures of certain things that were not appropriate? And at this point, I'm
how do
like,
you go
what?
from that though? Like from like not talking to like, hey, I know we haven't talked much, but like,
Let's send nudes.
Yeah.
can you send
Yeah.
basically? Basically.
And I'm like I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, what
Yeah,
did you just
yeah.
ask me?
I can
And
only
I'm
imagine.
like, all right, I told you to respect, and now we're doing this. So I'm at this kind of point where I'm like, do I continue being friends or not? And because it's like, I don't want to lose something that I lost to get and then lose again with
Right.
friendship. But then again, he's putting me in a position where I'm kind of like, I don't want to conform to what he's, pushing against me. So I'm
Right.
like, don't ask me that. Let's keep it like mutual. Let's continue to keep it mutual. I told you to respect the boundaries and whatnot. And he continues to do it. Continues and continues and continues.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, it's time to cut it off. I was like, all right, I told you however many times, don't like that.
When
don't
you're
want
saying
that.
this, were you in that calm composure that you are now?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
I was more of like, I don't really want to say this in a way that hurts your feelings, but like this is like kind of like weird for me. Like I've never been in this
Right. I mean,
situation.
No,
Yeah,
because I the only reason I asked that is because I can't imagine you mad. Like because so versus like if you were to be in that position,
I'd
I
be
feel
more
like
defensive.
you'd blow up.
No.
Kind of.
No.
If somebody was
Like-
pushy, if someone was pushy.
If somebody was being really pushy, I mean, it got there. Also has to get to the point. This is a beginning, right? This is
Yeah.
the beginning.
Right, and you're
stages.
also 12 years old, right?
and
Or
yeah.
you were- yeah.
At that
Around
point,
there.
it would, for me, the way I would handle it is like, listen, if you're gonna keep asking for it, then we're like, we can't hang out. Like this got to stop. Like
Yeah.
I asked you for boundaries in the beginning, and you're not respecting that.
Right,
like
right.
for me, it's I get
No,
on
but
the
that's you
defensive
now.
state.
That's you now. I'm talking about
Oh, me
12,
as-
13, 14-year-old Xavier.
Back in his
Blow
days.
up
Okay,
Xavier.
so me,
You know what? Back
me
in his
high
days.
school Xavier with the lack of spiritual maturity that I have today
It would have been very different.
would have been more homophobic.
Right.
I would have, and plus back then, being homophobic was like that's a thing you did. I mean, you would say no homo when you were.
Oh
Like,
my gosh,
being-
that's right.
Yeah, like that was the
even
thing.
like a
so
saying.
for me, it was very different.
Right.
For your
Yeah.
generation,
It was.
you'd get
Yeah.
canceled if you say no homo. It's like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
oh my
so-
gosh,
Exactly.
you totally brought me back. That was almost like just a thing that people would say all the time.
Yeah, because it was like if I was like, yo, bro, like I like that shirt, no homo. Like that's all it was. Like that's just what you did.
Wow, you just
Yeah.
like now I feel
Anytime you
old.
complimented a guy, like, bro, your hair, no homo though. It looks good.
Yeah.
But anyway,
wow.
please
I'm
continue
sorry,
on.
You're
but
good. No
the
worries.
reason why I was asking is because like I can't imagine how you were saying like, hey, like I just don't like that. Or were you like, bro, like you gotta just chill out,
Like progressively, it became more like you said, defensive. Like it was
Okay,
like
yeah.
now it's like you're continuing to ask,
You're
and
pushy.
I'm rejecting, and you're continuing, and that was really like upsetting because he was my best friend, and it was shocking, and it was different to like feel that kind of like hurt because that was something I've never been through before. Like your best friend is kind of like going against you in this way, and so I'm like, all right, we got to cut it off. So I'm like, that's it. We can't be friends anymore.
Yeah.
You completely lost my respect. So, this is where we are. So I block him, all these things. And eventually he comes back through other means, like different messages, different numbers,
Right, I mean,
different
you could-
apps.
oh,
It's
like you
endless.
blocked
It's
him
endless.
and
Yeah.
he found other ways.
And so then he continues asking. And this is like, all right, now it's becoming more of like you're not just asking.
You're
anymore. Now
harassing
like,
me.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
you're trying to force something that I don't want.
Right.
And so now I'm like, all right, I told you, and like now you're like you're doing too much. You're like you're going beyond limits. You're going beyond like respect. And so now I'm at this point where it's like, all right, I thought this is where anxiety began to pick up because I was like, all right,
Yeah.
now I don't know what to do because this person knows all my information. He has all this stuff about me. He knows all this about me. And he's asking for things that I don't want to give. And he's pushing me past where I'm comfortable and things that I don't want to do. And so I tell him, please, just stop. And now it's becoming more of, instead of telling him, it's more of asking him to stop doing something that, shouldn't even be something to ask to stop.
Right. Yeah.
And at one point, it came to a point where he began to say, I'm going to use the things that you've told me against other people to get what I want.
That's
and
crazy.
Blackmailing you.
Yeah, blackmail.
Wow.
And that was very hurtful. That was very, something that I didn't think would ever happen, because I was like, all right, I was trying to do something good with this friendship, but now it's kind of backfiring. And so now I'm in this rut of anxiety, and
It's like a total betrayal.
Yeah.
And now it's like, did you did you tell anyone like that this was?
No, definitely not, because
man.
it was a situation where I felt very uncomfortable
Right.
myself. So until I feel comfortable, I'm not gonna tell anybody else until like the situation's resolved or anything like that.
Right.
So that was definitely something I wish I had done. I wish I went to somebody and asked for help. But being it was just me and him, it was like I didn't want to openly express his, side, and I didn't want to tell people what I was going through, because that was something that I didn't, really sit right with. And so now I'm just here like
real quick, because old head mind kicking in. But your age, like, did you say how old you were?
like around 12ish, 13ish. So like
Seventh grade,
Yeah.
seventh, eighth, or what is that, like
Around
summer?
there. Yeah,
Around there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
around there.
Wow.
That's really young, man.
Yeah. And I remember because it was actually going into my freshman year. So freshman year being on Zoom, this progressed, and it got to a point where it was continual that he continued sending messages to ask for these things while I
So
was
this was over
in Zoom.
months.
It
like
was
that
over a
was-
period of time, and it was always like reoccurring, and it began to really get to me, and I was like, all right, what am I going to do? How am I going to stop this? And my mind was very like out of whack. It wasn't in the right mind space, and I wasn't at all prepared to, give an actual like response that, like how to stop this. So
Right.
I, in my mind, with all this anxiety and with all these with all this pressure of trying to just resolve this issue for once and like for all, I'm like, okay, I'll give you a deal. If I do what you ask, will you stop? And that's it. Like never again. And so he's like, okay, I agree. Thank you. And so I do it. And this is at a point where I'm like, all right, I just compromised my identity to give into someone else's pleasure, someone else's desires and something like that. And at the time, I just thought that was the best thing to do, because I'm not going to tell anybody,
This will stop.
This will stop, and I mean, you thought that was it, like finally a sense of relief, right?
And because I wasn't comfortable going to anybody, especially being in church, especially having a Christian household, I was very afraid what people would say, that it would become more of a criticism thing than
Because it's
Towards
such
you?
a taboo.
Yeah.
It's
Towards
such
you?
a taboo topic,
Yeah.
and it's all like, those are things that at least like in a couple years back you really don't discuss as much,
Yeah.
and now obviously things are changing for the good, that we do get to be more open within the church. But yeah, I mean, growing up and then feeling that, it's like, what do I do?
I was very, very concealed in myself and what to do. And so now I feel even worse. On top of the anxiety, on top of, all the stress and pressure, now I feel guilt, and now I feel shame, because I've, like I said, compromised the identity that I had, and that, as a Christian I should have upheld. And I begin to go through this identity crisis. Like, is this something that, I am comfortable with? Is this something that I enjoy? And it's something that I battled with, and it went from progressive, something that was influenced at a young age for me was pornography. And being with the people that I hung out with, that was okay. It was okay to, look at these things and do these things. And so now
I'm sorry, I hate to continue to cut you off, but you're saying, so you're 12, 13, you're dealing with this, and now you're saying at a younger age, how old were you when you started pornography?
Pornography was something that was introduced to me at a very young age, around like
Introduced to you? Someone introduced it to you?
Yes, it was in school, and it was something that I brought home, and I brought home privately, and that was something that I didn't think was wrong, and I explored that, and around like 7, 8ish, it was a very young age.
Yo, that's so young, man. That is so young.
And you thought you were young when
I thought I was 12 years old when I started mine, and my addiction, right? My habits. But we're talking 7, 8 years old. 7, 8 years old. What was I doing? I mean, I was just riding, just
like,
getting the freedom to ride my bike around the
right. That's like
around the block
second
or
grade
something.
or something. About
third
because you're
grade?
5. No,
Third
you're
grade, something
you're
like
like
that?
5 years old when you're in kindergarten. So yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, your parents would never think, right?
No,
I don't think any parent would ever think to, my kid's my kid's 7 years old. What is he thinking about sex for, right? That's going to go over their head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was something that I always kept hidden, because being that it was pornography, hearing about it in church, it was wrong. And I knew it was wrong, but it was something that caught my attention and became an addiction. And that was something that I hid. And hiding an addiction just makes it stronger, because if you don't openly express that you're going through it, then it becomes like concealed, and you try to find ways out of it yourself, but you fall back and all these things. And that's why it becomes an addiction. And so now going back again to the situation I'm in, where now I'm like lost with like just in my mind and everything, and how I feel about myself. Pornography becomes from, you know, the average, you know, just viewing experience to experimenting with watching different things. And this really like kicks up, you know, an attraction. And this is where I'm like, all right, I'm Christian, but I have these thoughts, and it's something that I never thought I would go through. It's something I never thought that I would experience, because why would a Christian guy have these thoughts, or why am I going through these, you know, withdrawals and you know, pornography experiences? And it's something that influenced me a lot, that really lowered my self-esteem. It lowered how I thought about myself. It
Wow.
concealed a lot in me, because I was ashamed that I had these attractions and these things. Never once did I act on it, like go out and publicly express that, because again, like I said, I was afraid of what people would say because I had this attraction, or how people would respond to it.
And again, you never hear about
Exactly.
it. Like no one talks about it.
But these attractions, they're showing up what age?
They're showing up in pornography, and
We're talking the 7, 8.
yeah, around that time. So
By the time this guy introduced himself to your life, you did have some speck of.
pornographic addiction.
But what I mean is
The attraction.
homosexual attraction.
No. It came
didn't.
afterwards.
Oh, I see.
And
Okay.
so
Okay.
that identity crisis was something that I struggled with for a very long time. And at one point, as he continued to, you know, pursue like the idea of like a relationship or pictures or having that constant, you know, inappropriate relationship, I began to grow depressed. And I was like, this is like, everything was just going downhill. It was just like all my emotions, all my feelings, all my self esteem, like all of it was just going downhill. And so that kickstarted a depression where I was very upset with myself, very sad, and I didn't know how to feel at all. And at one point, it even got to suicidal thoughts of wanting to end it, because I wasn't sure how to end this situation with him. And I just wanted to be free of like all these, you know, what's the word? Like all these emotions and all these different
Yeah.
things that, you know,
I know.
I
I'm
was
so
dealing
sorry you
with,
had to
so.
go through that. But
Look back at like these situations, and I smile because of where I was, and because of what I did, and because of what I went through, I can see that God was evident through it all. And now especially I can see that God used those things to glorify himself and to make something good out of those things. So it's something that I'm not ashamed of anymore. It's not something I have to hide anymore. It's something I would rather get out and help people with. If they go through those hidden struggles, I'm glad that God has given me the opportunity to experience these things, so I can speak to those who are afraid to reach out to others like I was. So, but yeah, going back to that, here I am, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, homosexual attraction, lust, pornography, all these different types of addictions.
You
and
just
sinful
feel like
habits.
this is
completely like, I feel like I'm washed, but like,
and I just like empathize. Yeah, because I'm here like, man, like you were doing this alone, and that's like, that's probably the worst part of it all, right? The feel of like, okay, I'm feeling all of this, but I just can't tell anybody at this point. Let me just continue.
And like I said earlier, loneliness was something that I've struggled with for a very long time.
Yeah.
Being in a household with people, sometimes it felt lonely when I would go through these things and not be able to tell anybody.
Right.
Not having the friends, the right friends to give me advice and to lead me to the right solutions, it made me feel even more alone. So, you know, one thing that really, you know, shifted that perspective that I had was then I once got the opportunity to move from Sunday kids worship to Wednesday church worship. And I was like, all right, I see that this is, you know, something that I like. It's, you know, something that's different. It's different in this situation. And so I try to kind of cultivate that, you know, still going through these things. So it's still not genuine, but it's there. And one thing after that was the first camp that I ever went to. I think after that camp, that retreat that I went to was the first time I ever, you know, experienced what God was like, seeing and experiencing. That was something that I was like, all right, this is good. This is something that I like. And, you know, come COVID time around freshman year, everybody begins getting sick. I'm still in this, you know, suicidal depression stage of my life. And people begin to, you know, they start dying because of COVID and all these different things start happening, all these different situations. And it's very stressful for, you know, my family. And one thing was my grandma. The person that I told you was very influential in my life. The person that always showed me wrong from right, was always there to teach me about the Bible, about church, and, you know, always encouraged me to sing and to worship and to do these things. She gets COVID and she gets very, very sick. So at this point, now I'm like, great, just another thing added on top of all of this. And it was just like devastating for my family, because the situation was very complicated, because there were underlying issues, but there was also COVID that made those underlying issues worse.
Right.
And so moving a little bit forward, not much, she passes away and my family is completely broken, like completely. And it's something that, you know, now I see there was so much pain and so much hurt that just came from that one death, that my family was distraught all over, from my mom's side to my dad's side, because my grandma was so influential. Even in the church, there were a lot of people that felt the impact of her death. But for me, when I received the news at first, I was coming home from school. It was one of those days that it was like you were able to go to school during Zoom. So I remember coming back on the bus, and I received a message from my friend Joel, and he's like, "Hey bro, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for your loss." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And I take it in for a second, and I realize that she passed away. So I go home. My dad picks me up from the bus stop at my house, drops me off at home, goes to pick up my mom. And I remember that this was the moment in my life that, like, it was like this. This was like my 180, or like the complete turnaround.
Yeah.
I go into my room completely like broken, like completely like shattered, that, you know, this is what I'm hearing as soon as I get out of school. Excuse me. And I remember going to my room, and in my room there's a window, and in the window there's the blinds and the curtains, and they were both closed. It was pretty cloudy that day too, and I remember specifically because when I sat down, I actually didn't sit down. I fell down to my knees, and I remember just thinking, all right, I'm in church all the time. I'm with my family all the time, and they don't know about these struggles. I'm struggling with these things, and I feel guilty. I feel shame. I feel like I can't be forgiven for the things that I've done. I don't know how to forgive myself. I feel alone, and I feel all these different things. I'm in church, and I'm doing these things in God's name, but yet again, I'm living this double twisted lifestyle. And so I remember just feeling all of that all at once, and I remember falling to my knees and just crying. Like, I don't think I've ever cried as intensely as I have when this moment came. And the reason was because I called out to God. I was like, God, please, just one more chance. Just give me one more chance. I want you to show yourself to me, and I want you to give me this reason to continue moving on. I know I don't deserve it, but I just would love to see you, present yourself to me one final time. And so I remember when I opened my eyes, I wiped the tears out of my eyes. You know how you have like that cloudy vision. I remember that the blinds were blown open, and the curtains were like waving, and outside of the blinds I see in the clouds, to anybody else it could have been just a shape in the clouds, but to me, the shape in the clouds that I saw, where the sun was like it was like a movie where the rays were coming through the clouds, there was a shape of a dove. And I remember that was my sign that God was with me in that moment, and I immediately felt all of those things just like fall away. And I remember feeling the weight of freedom was so much heavier than the weight of my sin. And I remember that was just so like,
oh, that's such a beautiful way to express that.
I get goosebumps just thinking about that.
The weight of freedom was heavier than the weight of sin. That is a beautiful way to express that, bro. That's very poetic.
Joselito.
Put that copyright.
Well, no, and it's beautiful too, because it says that God is close to the brokenhearted, and I know that in that moment, like it. And we were talking about this in our last episode too. Like, it's always that point where we're like, I can't anymore. Where it's just like, God, like, you need to do something. And it's that final like cry basically for help where God does show up. Yeah. And it happens all the time.
That's exactly what it was. It was like my final moment before like I couldn't do it anymore, because I was so like consumed in all of these things. But the moment that I called out to God genuinely for the first time, that's when all that went away. And I remember even that same night, I asked God for peace. And I remember seeing in a vision, like a dream, that my grandma, who loved purple flowers, was walking in one of those white robes, super elegant, super, super nice, and just clean. And I remember seeing her walking through that field into gates. And I remember that she like, in that moment, I was like, I woke up and I started crying, because I was like, she made it. I don't have to worry. And so that peace that God gave me carried over into my family. And I see that because of all those things, because God was able to come and meet me at my lowest, I was able to then, because of him, help my family find that peace, help my church friends and all these people. And just, because of God coming in and saving the day, like at the perfect moment, I was able to then progress in faith. And now where I am, I can say these things with joy that I'm glad I went through these things. I would never change the course of my life, because if it meant that I could come back to this point and be where I am now, going out and preaching, going out and evangelizing, going out and making disciples and just progressing in faith, I would do it all over again, because every moment was worth it, because where I am now with God is just beautiful. Like if you asked me at any point in any of that testimony, if I would be where I am right now, I would just completely ignore you and be like, what kind of question is that? But now, like, I look at it and I'm like, I'm so glad that God brought me through that testimony and allowed these things to happen. What the enemy, like you said, the enemy uses all these evil things to bring us down, but God uses those evil things to bring us up. And he definitely brought me up and brought me to a place where I can tell this testimony.
And through that, and through those evil things, and the good that God uses, the way that God uses that, he's also going to be able to save other people that are going through that oppression that the devil puts on them. Have you encountered any other people? I
have
with your same story.
And one situation was very similar. They were struggling with homosexual attraction, and what they were afraid to openly express that to anybody. And they were like, I need like a solution. I need an answer. And I remember just being able to like finally understand that this experience that I went through, it isn't bad now. Yes, it was bad at the moment, but now it's good because I have that experience. I can tell and testify that God saved me from that. And I actually remember that the person asked for prayer at the end of our conversation. And I just remember feeling so much peace that like God used my situation for his glory. And I was like, amen, praise you. You're good. You're so amazing, God. And so there's just like all those little experiences now that I have that I'm able to, say that God brought me through those and use them to help other people. And there's been countless times where my testimony has been like kind of like a segue into like helping other people. And I praise God for that, because that's all his glory. That's none of mine. And I give him all the glory for that. So
amen. Wow. That's just so beautiful. And just hearing it from our stance, right? Because that's just, it's one of those things where it's all like we see people everywhere, right? And especially in church, we get to see people all the time, but we never know what anyone is going through. And just again, like, if I knew that this was something back then, I wish we could be like, bro, like hugging you and just like, like you're not alone. But I'm also glad that, you were able to encounter God the way you did, because it's always at those low moments where we get to finally know who God is, right? Yeah. Like we were talking again, like I'm just referencing from the last, our last episode. For the last 3
episodes, where it's like you just have to get to your lowest point, and then that's where God will meet you.
Because it's like if you're, people say like, I want to know who God is. It's like, well, to know who God is, that he has to transform you. How can he give peace to someone who is always at peace or who never goes through anything? Or like if you pray for healing, then that means something has to be there, right? Yeah. Or if you're asking for a miracle, then that means he has to transform something ugly into something beautiful. But it's just beautiful to be able to hear how like everything has changed. And it's just always one of those things that I'm also reminded that, we think that our trials and things that we go through are sometimes like it's about us, and it's not, because at the end of the day, what we go through ends up serving for his kingdom to help out others. So
and you got a mission ahead of you, man, because I know there's so many more that are, dealing with the same
Christians.
thing. I remember one time there was a panel, and that was one of the questions that came up for that panel. It was actually in AYC. With someone asking, how do you deal with homosexual attraction or same-sex attraction? And unfortunately, because the panel was kind of controlled as far as what questions we could answer based on the time that we had, we weren't allowed to get to that. But it's definitely something that was in my heart ever since, because it's like, wow, like here we have really young teenagers asking for this. And of course, we're in a generation where that's like, if you don't have pronouns, or if you don't support LGBTQ, or if you're not like for trans or in any sense of the way, right? You're homophobic, you're offensive, you're canceled. Everything about you is evil, you know. So it's yes, you know, the oppression of homosexuality is it's so much greater than it was when I was a kid or when my parents were a kid, and it feels like it's only getting greater.
It's everywhere, and it causes confusion because then it causes people to ask, well, what do I think about this, or am I attracted, or am I this?
It's like sometimes, you know? And it's even to the point where it's like, listen, just focus on being 12 years old, man. Focus on being 13 years old. Don't worry about what you're attracted to. You don't even know yourself. Like my parents would say, you don't know how to wipe your own butt, and you're over here talking about attractions.
But
like,
that's also hard, right? Because when you're young, you so desperately want to be older.
Right, I understand.
You know?
But what I mean is, what I'm trying to say is where the world is trying to get these kids to think about it.
Yes.
Although, yes, it does happen, but why is the world involving
pushing
themselves to push kids? I'm talking kids that are still in like elementary to know who they are. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Just let them play with their toys. You know what I mean? Like, let them be.
Let the kids be kids.
Let kids be kids.
Yeah, you know, so I'm sorry that you went through it, but at the same time, it's like, bro, good that you went through it because we need more warriors like you.
Yeah.
And I think that God has definitely shown me that that's something that I should take as a blessing, because the first time that I found another Christian that was going through that wasn't until recently. Well, not recently, but like, you know, a year or two ago, when I openly expressed that. My friend was like, oh my gosh, I've never been, you know, with another Christian that's gone through that, because they never open up about that.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it became this whole this topic, and I was just like shocked that, you know, my friend was going through that at one point, and now here we are talking about it, talking about the struggles that we went through and how we can use that to advance the gospel. And it was just so heartwarming, because Christians, I feel, are very ashamed to speak about homosexual attraction, because
and I think there's a lot.
I
wouldn't
in all
say,
generations. In all generations.
I think there's a lot of people that struggle with that, and they're just not saying anything.
It's because they're afraid. I mean,
Well,
it's the same thing. Like for me, I was afraid for a very long time to talk about my porn addiction that I had. You know, and when I finally did, bro, tons of dudes came up to me like, like your podcast was a blessing, this and that, like, thank you for talking about it. And there was a lot of them that asked me for advice. Hey, how do you get away from this, or how do you get away from that? And the first thing I tell everybody is get away from the shame, because once you eliminate the shame, you eliminate that darkness that the devil puts you in.
Yeah,
because
like tries to keep you alone and isolated. If he can keep you alone and he can keep you from talking, then one, you're not going to help nobody by talking about it, and another, you're not going to help yourself by talking about it. Right.
By not talking about it.
Yeah,
you know? So I lost myself there, but I made my point. You know, like that's what I mean. Like, it's just, you have to get away from the shame, and talking about it and being the warrior that you are is going to help so many more people, because there are people in the dark right now. And even after talking about it, there are still people in the dark, because homosexuality, or it's in the Christian community, is so taboo that it's like, to say that you have had attractions, it's like, bro, like,
what's
you
wrong
need some
with
holy water.
you?
What's wrong with you? Like,
yeah.
you need Jesus. And
some
it's
people
such
do
condemnation.
say that. Some people do say that too. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me.
Right. And it's like, bro, like, that's oppression. That's just that's what it is.
As long as we're in this world
and seek the
this
help.
Is flesh.
Yeah.
You know, we are bound to have just sinful desires.
Yeah.
You know,
and I see now that the sin of homosexuality, it carries the same consequences as any other sin.
Yeah.
But because it's so emboldened and so highlighted in the Christian community and just in the world in general, the, you know, homosexual attraction and relationships and stuff like that, it's become more of like a pinpoint conversation. It's become a hot topic that you either have to have a standpoint on it or not. And if you don't, like you said, you're homosexual. And I feel like as Christians, that's why they're afraid to open up.
If you don't, you're homophobic, right?
Yeah,
that's
homophobic.
what you're
Yeah.
Sorry. My bad. That's a lot of words. But yeah, like, I feel like that's something that as Christians, we have kind of, especially, you know, in the past, have made homosexual sin seem like it's more than just sin. It's something stronger than sin.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's just like any other sin. It's like any other lustful attraction. And I feel like that's where people stop themselves and hold themselves to guilt and hold themselves to shame, is because they feel like it carries a heavier weight, and it's more to get rid of.
It seems like the bigger sin.
Yeah. It seems like one of those.
But that's all us. We're the ones making that up.
Yeah.
We're the ones, because that's what our culture is telling us to do. Our culture is telling us, no, homosexuality. Oh my God, no, I por Dios. You get me? Like, when it's really like, okay, but you're a habitual liar, or okay, you're a huge gossiper, and you're always talking bad about your pastor. So, we're all in the wrong, and really, what we need to realize is that we're all sinners, and we need to make our way to the temple, our God. We need to make our way to church, because that's where we're going to be healed from our sins. And so, if we keep rejecting people that are dealing with homosexual attraction, all we're really doing is saying, "Hey, you're not worthy of God's love," when really God is saying, I love everyone, no matter what.
Yeah.
Amen.
We're always so focused on John 3:16, but we don't look into John 3:17, where it talks about how God didn't come down to condemn the world. God came to save it.
Yeah.
And how did he come to save it? By giving us the opportunity to love him, to believe in him, to have faith in him.
Yeah.
And by accepting and confessing that he is Lord, that is the way that we're going to make our way into heaven with our eternal life.
Amen.
Amen.
Honestly, man, like the argument, the one-way side that we have in church gets me so frustrated. But warriors like you, bro, that's what's gonna start bringing more light into this.
We're getting there.
Into this healing process that we need, that we need as Christians, to accept that we are all sinners, and healing process for people who are dealing with sins like you've dealt with, to come into the light and to get away from that.
Yeah. And this is one of those things that I was saying again, like, as far as like your generation being much more outspoken, because our past generation would never. Millennials, I feel like, are a lot more open to things, and Gen Z is all like, let's go, like, here's everything. They're
very for it.
This is it. And that's why I'm saying, like, I can't wait to see what happens.
It really is.
Yeah. Because that's what we need. We need the transparency, so again, kudos to you, dude. And we will continue praying for you, and that God may just use you and bring you to spaces where people need to hear your testimony. So
thank you.
And speaking of testimonies, we also have Carlo here,
yes,
who gave us a quick glimpse of what his testimony is.
Yeah.
Carlo, you mentioned about leaving church.
Yeah.
And you talked about how your friendships that you had kind of like took you away from that.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak a little bit more on that? Because I know there are many who, just like what he spoke about, they're also going through what you spoke about.
Yeah.
So first I want to start off by saying what had got me into the church in the very beginning. So first I had when I was young, I grew up with my 4 cousins and my aunt, because I would always go over their house, because my dad would always be at work, my sister would always be at school.
Yeah.
So I would always go over to my cousin's house, spend time with them, because I always see my cousins as brothers, and I still do to this very day. So as I would go to my cousin's house very often, my aunt would tell me, all right, you want to sleep over? You want to come over? You got to come to church. You got to come to church on Sunday. So I'll be like, all right.
That's really clever of her.
Yeah,
So
right.
I'll be like, all right, I got to go to church. All right, no problem. I'll go to church. At first, I was young. I was 9 years old. I wasn't paying attention to what was going on, what was being said.
Yeah.
I wasn't really dealing with so many problems. So it got to a point where one service for, I think, AYC, I really felt the presence of God, and it really brought me close to God. And after then, I really devoted my life to God, and I was really disciplined in following the gospel and trying to better myself, better my mentality. Even though I was very young, I was 12, 13 years old, I was really trying to be spiritually mature. So as I kept progressing in that, I ended up getting baptized. I ended up continuing my walk in faith. So it got to a point where I reached like high school, where some people would look at me like, oh, he's Christian. Oh, you're the Christian kid, right? So then me being immature in a sense, I was like, oh
like,
man,
no, what are you saying?
yeah, like I was like, what you saying? Like
sometimes.
what you mean? Yeah, so I was like, man, but I'm trying to have friends. I'm trying to be cool with these people.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, all right, let me just put God to the side for now. That's how I thought about it. And then I eventually ended up just stop going to church. I eventually ended up stop walking in faith, and I let my environment get the best of me. And I can't blame nobody else but myself for that.
Yeah.
Because I made that decision. So then I eventually ended up started hanging out with the wrong people. I ended up started doing a bunch of dumb things. I was very heavy into smoking weed, you know, popping pills, taking drugs, a bunch of those things.
Wow, you really got deep into it, huh?
I got deep into it.
At what age at this point?
I was about 15 years old.
Wow,
15, 16 years old.
Wow.
Again, so young, man. So young.
So young to experience like all those things and to be exposed to all of that, you know?
But it is a reality because you know what? When I was 14, I mean, kids were already drinking.
Yep.
And kids were, at the time, it was like weed wasn't really out there as much. But what it was is you had a guy that could sell you Black Miles. And basically it's like tobacco. It's like cigarettes and stuff. And whoever got to smoke that, you were cool. You
but
know,
I
like
do remember even in high school.
Yeah,
like
no, it
people,
was still a thing. I mean, but
because I
freshman
remember
year.
you told me,
Yeah, but I'm talking like freshman year. Job by junior year was a little easier to access.
Yeah.
For us.
Actually, talking about that, I was 15 years old going into the corner store buying Black and Milds.
Really?
They would sell it to me, no problem. They would just give it to me.
So the corner store didn't even let you. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, a lot of it also like, it just depends on too when, especially when it's like more urban, like they don't care.
Yeah.
If anything, they encourage it.
The thing is, where we're from, Elizabeth, New Jersey, is very common. It's
Yeah.
It's normalized.
Yeah.
So if somebody's trying to, a 15-year-old is trying to go get a cigarette, a Black and Mild, whatever, a wrap, to roll some weed up there, they see it as normal, so they just give it
them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Was vaping or e-cigarettes a thing for you?
Oh yeah, very much so. I was doing that every single day, vaping, smoking. But I want to mention another important thing that I forgot to mention.
Okay.
One thing that I could say that also drove me away from God was I was having a lot of issues at my own home. I was having a lot of issues with my father, and I feel like that made me stay out the house a lot, you know. So I would want to hang out with my friends outside or go to these parks, and
it's like anything that would stop you from being home, basically.
Exactly. I would enjoy to hang out in the hood and stuff like that with these other people, because that's where I thought I was receiving my love at.
Right.
You know, because I really felt like I wasn't receiving that love.
Yeah.
You know. So
yeah, I get it.
So I ended up just, you know, started hanging out on the streets a lot, doing a bunch of dumb things, and as I got older, I started to realize, like, man, what I'm doing isn't right. Like this isn't beneficial for me. I'm not going nowhere with this.
But you're still okay. So as you got older, let's say, what age? Like
when I had that realization, I'd say when I find
when it sparked, like when it kind of like sparked in you, like, dang, you're like
what am I doing?
I'm not really where I want to be.
Okay, actually, let me fix this. All right, so
so you jumping ahead,
like,
jumping ahead.
No, I think he jumped ahead.
No, I jumped ahead. It's because I'm having so many memories right now. I'm like remembering things. So it was about 2019, 2020. This is when I really started getting heavy into the pills and stuff. There would be a point in my life where I was at school. I would pop a pill in the morning. I would black out, wake up in my bed.
Wow.
A few hours later. Yep. So
you would get these pills from school, or
no, I would just get it from the streets and stuff.
Wow.
Get these pills from the streets. So, because I didn't really enjoy my reality. I was trying to escape. I was trying to like escape from everything.
And the thing too with like this, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's like the deeper you get into like stronger things, like it also requires you to be in other areas, surrounded by people who are like, you know, have other things as well. Exactly. And it just gets worse and worse, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all good. So eventually I made a personal decision for myself. I was like, I got to get away from this. I got to separate myself. I got to stop doing these drugs. I'm wilding. So I ended up going to Florida to live with my mom for a few months, because my mom lives in Florida.
Okay.
So I asked her, I was like, Mommy, can I just stay with you for a few months? She was like, yeah, no problem. You just make sure you go to school. All right. So I did that. Stayed there for a few months. I got clean. I stayed away from pills. I was still smoking weed, but I stayed away from the pills and stuff like that. So then I eventually came back. When I came back, though, I stopped pills, but I started drinking now. I was never a drinker. Because the thing is, when I was very, very young, I used to see my father drink a lot.
Yeah.
And I would see how sometimes it will bring out this aggression from him.
This was before you were 21, or
Yeah. This is before I was 21.
Yeah.
So
even then, huh?
at this point, when I started drinking, I was about 18 years old.
Okay.
Got it.
So
Heavy?
Yeah, heavy. Like
Oof.
a bottle.
Yeah.
A whole,
Oh, wow.
A whole bottle just by myself. Just keep pouring up. So when I was really young, I would try to not do that because I would see my dad drink a lot and I could see how aggressive he could be sometimes.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, I don't want to be like that. So I eventually started doing it myself, and then I thought it was cool. I thought I was feeling good. So I kept doing it because I believed at that point it was putting me in a positive mindset, which it wasn't. So because I was very dependent on it. So then as time progressed, I just continued drinking, smoking. I eventually stopped smoking because smoking began to get me anxious and stuff like that. And I knew it wasn't. Like,
and this was weed that would get you anxious?
Yeah.
Which is crazy because that's the
like
argument of like, oh, the only reason I'm smoking weed is because to
I'm
relieve
anxious.
my anxiety.
But
Wow.
really, it was causing your anxiety.
It was causing my anxiety.
Wow.
So I stopped smoking weed. I began just heavy drinking. And so then it got to the point where I was like, man, I got to stop drinking too. I got to get my health together, because I was really, when I was younger, I was very healthy. I was very like active, playing basketball often, into sports, at the gym. So I was like, man, I got to get my health together. So I put the bottle down. I started focusing on my health. And then,
and you're doing this alone, right?
Yeah. No.
Like you're having your own epiphany. Like
it was like I was going through all this alone, but I would have friends and stuff that would be into the same thing. So I would also do it with them, partake with them. And then, when was it? About June of 2023 this year. One of our members from our youth group, Avalanche Youth, had invited me to one of the services that they have, church outside the walls, where we play sports outside.
Yeah.
So she was like, "Oh, hey Carlo, you should come by, because I know you play basketball and stuff. I know you enjoy playing basketball." I was like, you know what, I should give it a shot, because it's been so many years. It's at this point, it was about 6-7 years since the last time I went to church.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because the last time I went to church was like 2016.
Yeah.
And your life was like totally different.
Totally
you were way
different.
younger.
And so you went to this church outside the walls, and did you feel nervous at all? Like, did you feel like uncomfortable by going back to church? Like, it's been so long.
Honestly, I did feel nervous, because I was like, man, I ain't see these people in years. Like, I know a lot of these people still come to this church.
Yeah.
I was cool with some of these people, so I was
He's like,
nervous.
I don't want to see Xavier,
I wasn't gonna be there.
I'm kidding.
I wasn't gonna be there.
I'm kidding.
I wasn't necessarily like, oh my God, what they're gonna think of me, or nothing like that. But I was just like,
you were just nervous to go.
I was just nervous to go.
Okay.
So as soon as I got there, a bunch of people welcomed me. "Oh, Carlo, how you been?"
Yeah.
I catched up with a lot of people, but something that really interested me was, a producer from my city, Elizabeth. He's very young, 15 years old, very talented. He works with a lot of the local artists. He was there, and I was so shocked to see him there. I was like,
at the church? Really?
Yes. At church outside the walls. And I was very surprised. I was like, yo, you come to this church? And he was like, yeah, I've been coming here for the past year, but it's, I come here once in a while. And I was just really thinking, I feel like right there I had my realization, like what have I really been doing these past few years?
Wow.
What have I been doing with my life?
Wow.
Because when I was his age, 15, younger, I was into the church. I had a strong relationship with God. So I was really thinking, like, what am I doing with my life? And I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to mention.
You're good.
But, I also started making music. I also started rapping around 2020. So,
Wow.
But we're talking, it's 2020. So secular music.
Yeah, secular music.
Yeah.
I was making a lot of secular music. And I continued to be on and off with it. And this year, 2023, that's when I began dropping music videos. So then, so going back to when I seen him and when I spoke to him, I really had that realization, like, what have I been doing with my career, with my music? Because I'm really into the music. What I have been doing with my life, with my music, I could be doing so much better. I could be doing things that are positive, that could make God happy, Because one thing I could always admit is that even though I was going through all these things, God always had my back. God always protected me. God always had his best intentions with me.
Yeah.
Because there's been so many times where things could have been a lot worse. Things could have gotten bad. And I thank God every day for keeping me safe and for keeping me protected.
Well, yeah, because you saying that like you would take a pill and then just randomly like
you
who knows what could have happened? Like God's hand was on you, you know,
and
anything could have happened at this
right.
point.
And it's like nowadays there's a lot of fake pills out on the streets and stuff like that. There's stories of people just taking one pill,
and they just die or something, right?
That's it.
Which I do have a question. You know, being because you have experienced that. Would you say that like taking weed is like that gateway drug to like wanting to get something even stronger and stronger?
For me personally, I would say yes, because weed was the first thing I started doing.
So you started doing weed, and so what was it that you were feeling? Like you were just like, did you become tolerant before you looked for something? Oh, okay. That's what it was. You found a tolerance.
I would smoke weed so much that it would even affect me no more. Like I wouldn't even get high off it no more. So I'm like, I still want to feel this certain way. So I resorted to going to pills.
Wow.
And then that's where I had my big downfall.
Yeah.
But so
that's a good question, by the way.
Yeah.
So going back to what I was saying. Oh yeah. So I had that realization. I was like, you know what? After today, I'm gonna make a change. I'm gonna give my life to God again. I'm gonna do things differently because I want to be an influence not only for people around me, but especially the youth. That's one thing that I really want to do, and I'm very passionate about, because it's like I want to influence the youth in a way where they continue to see God. They continue to build.
You don't want to see them fall back.
Exactly.
Into
I don't want to see them fall like how I did when I was their age.
Yeah.
So after that, I consistently went to church. I always go to prayer on Mondays.
That's so good.
The service.
I know.
On
I
Wednesdays.
feel like just seeing you, like I feel like as a recently, maybe like a month ago or so, like seeing you like on a weekday service, because I know the pastor even says it, like those weekday services are like for the warriors, right? Because you got so much going on at home, you could easily just stay at home. So like actually coming to the services, it's like, man, like God, like I really want you and I need you. So it's like seeing that, like I think the other day, like I saw him and I was all like, wow, that's so crazy. Like he was literally gone for so long, and now he's all like, I'm here.
And you did it such a 180 too, because
like,
I mean,
like
I still remember when I first saw you on Sunday. I was like, yo, is that Carlo? Like I just had to go up to you and just like shake your hand and give you a hug, man. It was really nice to see you, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's so good to hear that, you know, you did this 180 and
it's
now
really what it was.
And now you're, you know, and you're talking about you're an artist. So are you using that art now? Are you using that? You're doing rap, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you doing that now for God? Like,
I still have yet to release new music, but
okay. But you're working on something. It's cooking.
Something's cooking.
Go.
So, and I want to have my music all for the glory of God. Everything to glorify God. I wanted to spread the glory of God and spread motivation and positivity, because I feel like a lot of the music nowadays is very dark and very negative, and I just want to help bring that light.
Now, is it rap or is it trap?
It's rap.
It's rap. Okay.
And also, let's admit, we don't have the best Christian rap, so we need a little revamp.
We were just talking about that.
We were in the car on the way here, and I was like, all right, look, I made this playlist of Christian rap. It took me so long to get like 10 songs, because some of the songs are just like,
it's just
so
whack. Some of them are just like,
like I love rap, but it's like I can't be out here hearing secular rap. But I'm also like,
for me growing up, the only rap artist that I would listen to, and although I did miss out on EJ, what's the artist? Who? NF. I missed out on NF.
Oh, yeah.
Growing up, I missed out on NF. So the only one that I really listened to was Lecrae. And then eventually it was Andy Mineo. But I didn't really get into him though. Like I just like I couldn't get into him.
I liked him, but then I kind of stopped.
Yeah. But that was really it. That's all I had. You know, so yeah, man, if you're gonna be doing rap, man, go all out, bro.
He's
because
gonna be on my playlist.
We need more. We need more.
Carlo.
And I feel like a lot of things that are trending right now is like the drill beats and stuff like that. It's like a certain genre of music.
Okay.
So it's like I would like to rap on those beats, but doing it in a way that's positive, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm very looking forward to it, and I know God has big things in store for me.
And what's awesome too is that you have like, so I know that just in music in general, like the best music comes out from like the true authentic feeling and experience. And I feel like you just have so much.
Yeah, you'll be speaking from real,
real life experience. You know. So we're excited for that, man.
It means a lot to me. It means a lot.
And there's just so many people that there's countless amount of people that have gone through what you've gone through, and it's not like it's not an identical story, right? But it's bad influence, then it's I left the church and then I found my way back. Amen. Like you are the prodigal son in that sense.
Yes.
So your story I know is going to be blessing so many people. And the music that's going to come out of you, I know for sure that you're going to be blessing people.
Don't forget us when you're famous, bro.
Yeah, for real. Don't forget us, man. Don't forget us. Shout out 716.
I know, right?
716 was my first podcast.
I do have a question though. So like what do you think could have been different for you? Because I feel like the whole story of like, knowing God, then like turning away and then coming back, it happens to a lot of Christians. It happened to me for like a short time, and that was me born and raised in church. So what would you say is something that maybe could have changed your direction to like avoid
let him from not leaving?
From not leaving.
Oh,
one thing I could say is there was a lot of good leaders back in the day when I was, going to AYC and stuff like that. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't want anybody to misinterpret it in a way where I'm saying, there weren't no good leaders and nothing like that. Yeah. But personally, I had felt very alone. I felt like I only had myself. So it's like when
age group wise or just.
Yeah, I would say it's age group wise because there was a lot of older people that were in the church that were.
That's true. I was there when you were there.
I was 13.
We were
14.
the older ones.
Yeah, I was 13, 14. Everybody else is 22, 23, 24. So it's not really in my age group, So I was really. I felt like in a sense I was really alone,
Yeah.
So that's why even though I'm 21, I still I want to involve myself with the youth, I still want to show them that I'm there for them if they ever need me, if they need help with something, if they need a prayer or something, anything.
So you're fixing what we failed on.
Yeah.
I don't want to say you didn't feel, bro.
It's all right. It's all right. I get it. Like, you shot us, but it's okay. No, I'm kidding.
But it's great because how old are you again?
I'm 21.
21. So it's like you're still in that stage where like you are young, right? But also like high schoolers can still respect that age because it's like you're not super old, but you're also still older where you can give life experience.
I'll try to like say hi to some of the young ones. Yo, they don't want to say hi to me.
They're like, who are you? And I'm here like, bro, I was your age not too long ago. Man, get out of here. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, but that's good though. And like I get that because one of the things that I wish, growing up was that they didn't separate us the way they did. You know what I mean? One of the things that I feel like my church, and I'm not talking about El Shaddai because I came from a different one, was that the age groups were too separated, and it was like it was almost shunned to be able to speak to someone that was older, and they didn't. It's like the only influence that you had was your Sunday school teacher and the friends of your age, but there was not that many because it was a small church. So my older youth, they would almost ignore me, or they wouldn't even look at me.
Yep.
And like if there's anything I wish would have changed in my church was that. So for you to do it and for you to go after the young ones the way you're doing it, bro, kudos, man. That's good. We need that. And I hope that more people come out and end up being the way you are. Once you get to that 21, 22, do the same thing for your 13-year-old
don't
counterparts.
Forget about them, bro.
One thing I can say though is Joselito really does. He's really there for the youth.
Yeah. No, I've seen it. And
it's like when I first met him, like I really thought he was my age. I thought he was 21, but come to find out he's 17, 4 years younger than me. And it's like it's so surprising to me because how spiritually mature he is.
Yeah.
So,
but that's what it is, man. Like although you're young, that doesn't mean anything. Spiritual maturity that happens within your encounter with God. That happens within the time that you put towards God. It doesn't matter your age. God will use you the way He needs to use you. And a lot of our older generations, we will refuse to listen to a younger one. And I'm talking older. Much older than us. They'll refuse to listen to us just because of our age.
Yeah.
And they're
think,
like,
oh, no, like, what do you know?
Like, what do you know? You're too young.
Yeah.
Or I've lived your life, and they'll see that and then they'll block themselves from ever receiving a word from us, a fresh word that got instilled in us just because of our age.
Yeah.
You know, so I hope that chain breaks with your generation and it grows into the positive direction.
Yeah, because
Amen.
we can all learn from each other. I mean, even just from like your testimony to your testimony, and you guys are younger than us, you know, but that doesn't mean that God isn't speaking through you, you know? So it's just a beautiful thing. Like that just goes back to like unity.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, like we have like things like, I think it's smart that we do have like the age categories, right? Because you get to relate a little bit more. But at the end of the day, the message is still the same as far as like God's love, right?
Yeah.
And then being able to share each other's testimonies to grow together.
Yeah. Yeah, because the age categories, there are important. I mean, there's a difference. I need to receive a deeper, like, not that we all don't need to receive it, but the way somebody might speak to me or my English is different from your English. You get me? Although we're still speaking English, it's just the way I hear it is different from the way you hear it. So doing the separation as far as age group for different types of teachings,
It's also life
important,
experience
but
too.
I'm talking about like, let's break the chain of I can't talk to someone that's 17 because
Right.
what do they know?
Yeah.
Let's break that chain because he can definitely teach me something that I might have not
Amen.
looked at.
Right,
He's taught
right.
me so much.
Yeah,
I'm very-
absolutely.
I'm very glad to have met Joselito because when I first started coming, he was really that person that still to this day I look up to because how spiritually mature he is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm very blessed to meet my boy right here, man.
Oh, you made him blush a little. He's like, yeah.
Praise God, praise
But
God.
I know that we're basically wrapping up here, and we're also she has a Bible study to lead
Yes.
actually.
Gloria.
Yeah.
But before we wrap this up, I do want to ask you guys to like maybe give for you to start first, right? But to give a quick advice that you would give to someone that's currently, you know, having friends that are kind of leading them astray. I guess point them in the right, a better direction if they're listening.
Or if it was your age, like what did you need to hear?
Just continue to be a light in the darkness. You know, this world is very dark. That's what the enemy wants. You know, for a lot of the youth to fall down, and just to fail and stuff like that. But we can't. We got to stand firm in our faith, and I promise God is going to protect you. God is going to continue to lead the way. All you got to do is just have your faith in Him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
amen. Yeah.
And for you, Joselito, for anybody that's, you know, struggling with same-sex attraction, or, you know, I know that you're way past that point. Like, how would somebody, if it's like messing with them, right? Like it's in their head on and off. It's like they're fighting that battle where it's like, no, like I can't think like that. I'm Christian. I can't. What would you say to that person? What should that person do? Should that person speak out about it right away, or what would that look like for you?
For me, my like recommendation would be is to understand that no sin is greater than God. That's the first thing to
Amen.
understand when it comes to an attraction like that, or to any sin in general. But if it is specifically homosexual attraction, understand that the guilt and the shame and all of that stuff that hinders you from getting rid of that attraction, just understand that God is greater than that. Once you understand that, then you can understand that the word of God helps me to realize that purpose, to realize that potential, to realize that truth, that my sin means nothing in the eyes of God. He can take it away in an instant. And if I just continue to be persistent on praying for this attraction to go away, praying for God's will in my life, then you begin to realize that the sin will slowly fade away. If you start focusing on God, all other things start to lose taste. So you'll lose taste for those attractions, for those desires to feed the flesh and all of that. Like, in your walk with God, it's going to take a lot of starving your flesh, but a lot of feeding your spirit to get rid of all those addictions. And like I said, it's not just homosexual attraction, but if that is your attraction and that is your sin that you're struggling with, definitely focus on God and just let Him handle it, because only God can do what God can do. We try so hard to cast our sin away, to fight our sin, when the Bible actually calls us to run and flee from sexual sin and sexual immorality. So just focus on
That's
God.
awesome.
And
that's
He'll
awesome,
take it
because
away.
that also applies to literally, I mean, like you said, all sins, right?
Yeah.
God is greater than all sins.
Amen.
And in God's eyes, like we spoke about before, sins are in an equal playing field.
Yeah.
Sin is sin.
They all have the
right.
same
So
consequence.
what he's saying applies to literally everything. If you're struggling with gossiping a bunch of times, stop putting yourself in that situation. Starve your flesh and start feeding yourself with the word that is God, breath, that is life, right? Yeah. So what you said is amazing. What you said is amazing. Guys, thank you so much. This has been such a blessing.
Thank you guys for
having us.
Also, I do, and just because I've remembered right now, for my older crowd that's listening, and honestly, before we end this here, I just want to speak to my older crowd, right? These guys are young, and they fell into their sin at a very young age. Careful with what your children are listening to. Careful with the people that are surrounding your children, because you just never know. I'm not a father yet. In God's timing, I will be. But the day that happens, you guys made it clear to me that I have to be careful, even if they're 5, 6, 7 years old.
Yep.
Because pornography is the devil. You know what? Let's just say the devil doesn't sleep. Yep. Right? And I said it before. The devil doesn't sleep. You do. So we have to be more vigilant. We're in a generation where it's attacking the young at young. We're talking young. The minute they get to speak English.
Yeah.
It's like as soon as they're associating with anything other than your word, God's word, and your family, the devil's gonna find his way in.
Yeah.
And creak his way in slowly in there.
So just be careful and don't think, oh, my child's not gonna be doing that. Yep. No, your child might have fallen or already experienced that.
Right. And I just thought of a Bible verse that, because we were talking about like ages, kind of just bringing it back to what we were talking about before, how like, you know, just because you're 30, 40 years old doesn't mean that you can't take the word at someone who's 17, that someone who's 21, 22. Yeah. Okay. So it's in 1 Timothy 4:3 where it says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech and conduct, in love and faith and in purity. Yeah, so, you know, I just pray that God continues to use both of you guys. Of all ages, right? The younger than young and the young. But seriously, guys, we will continue to pray for you guys, and we can't wait to see like just the future. Like I get excited when I see it's almost like beginning stories, and I'm here like, I can't wait to see what this will look like in 5 years, in 10 years from now, you know?
Yeah, it's gonna be beautiful.
Yeah,
Amen.
Guys, God is gonna continue to use you. Just continue following His word. Be faithful. I mean, I know you guys aren't gonna. Yeah, I know. At this point, it's like you guys know, but don't sleep. Don't sleep on the devil. He's creative, bro. He's strategic in the way that he tries to get us to fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So none of us are safe from that. Mm-hmm. But all right, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. Thank you if you're still watching at this point. Thank you for tuning in.
I know. I'm sure we went like pretty up there in time. Yeah, always.
So, guys, as always, if you like this episode, comment down below. Let us know. Give us that like button, and please subscribe to our channel if you don't already.
And also, we're gonna put their Instagram handles. That way, you guys can like follow them as well. Yes. I don't know if you said that, but like,
no, I haven't.
I tuned out for like a second. Yeah. But yeah, we'll put their information down too in the description, and that is it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Eso.
Yeah.
That was the bye I wanted.
Yeah.